Hello, YouTubers. This live stream, I'm questioning the presidential slash chief candidates and whatever it is syntactically, where there's a difference between people. But anyway, in other words, it's chief. The presidents have to represent what there is no means for them to represent except for how the species volume science itself, hypernative pure, is that which itself is showing us a breaching method used and is using U/S of the difference of native populations at countries A through Z. Other is being and has been communicated for America's founders. But regardless of all those negatives, I address in my live YouTube streams and videos. In other words, we have means to turn negatives into hyper positives, which is distinct from turning negatives into positives. And a breaching method knew that it could maintain only fathomed, being and having been, where negatives were turned into positives exactly the way they needed to stay collusions with fact treatment nature defenses of selves that were also physical defenses of selves, forced by a breaching method that simultaneously forced other things, others, or selves, more and more only capable of being blamed for things it caused historically, and it had, and per its relativity right now to active issues, America and countries A through Z. All natures of peace have stayed. Means for the criminal and citizen's natures of peace. I am not a lawyer. Thank God, because we have hyper evidential that we could attend here with. And countries A through Z are hurt sickly distinctly. Because we have been. You see, this breaching method came from before religious messengers, which is more practical and probable. But this has not been. The nature of debate contains quality aspect slash S, and nature slash S, like criminal and citizen's natures, of predicate acts for facts, roles, needs, natures, and styles, relative to where and to how the founding communications have been replaced. We were supposed to understand that which was entrenched with those laws that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded only allowed roles with selves hurting selves, and helping them with damage control that also has collusions keeping other things, others, or self blamed for nature's demonstrations about what really caused the worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. So in the cartoon value nature system, which is a hyper additional extension of the real value nature system, everyone's now countries A through Z are counter extorted too. The same way we could observe the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. And at the time they wanted to build better and safer. And you know, that identity of the ground, identity of relationship to itself causes more and more the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures relative to it causes simultaneously negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and we're a demonstration of the identity of hyperrelativity, its identity of relationship to itself, hypernative pure, and the only increasing value of that, and where and how it is a conjunction slash hyperconjunction to reason, is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible, hyper-simultaneous nature that is inseparable from all parts of language slash languages, distinctly but non-distinctly too, simultaneously, further hyper-simultaneously, just like in how there are other species bodies, individual, group, different slash S, and species body, and there is our own. And this volume slash volumes science and identity of value progression is hyper additionally not just us and them, the other species bodies. There is a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible, as the identity of hyper simultaneous but still discernible. It is why and how, for example, we need more than one word for the verb. And it is why and how the parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible. In other words, see, but the sciences also share an identity which is in demonstration of how it is hyper-additional nature. It groups the value of boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. And while it's demonstrating how the sciences share the identity of the hyper-simultaneous nature, and where and how not, it uses too, but we have not been appreciating its system syntactically. We have been entertained uses of names A through Z of the human volume science /S through and as systems tactical ulterior from the one. So this measured and maintained also styles, in other words, all natures of logic, reason experts, certain type of victim / hyper victims since they were kids to state collusion, where and how each of the sciences have syntax. That is, in other words, my plan. Can we use this plan? Not my plan. I'm trying. This is designed, tracing nature. Nature would shows us the best way to do it, and when there are exceptions, how to use it, how to appreciate that. But there is mass fake planting of exceptions. There is mass fake reliance on integrity relative to, for example, the predicate acts with facts delivery system method /S, that the little kids and that the adults from the suburbs of the cartoon value nature system to the New York version of it. In other words, New York, Little Rap Gang friends, for example, they are charged with cultivating the counter extortion of New York City, Hartford, and of the neighboring suburbs and nations, which is relative to where and to how, from America to Russia, which was a country on paper before us. But from America to Russia to Ukraine, the suburbs were designed tactically to nature for torture, extortion, and slavery. There's a nature of debate that contains quality aspects in natures that are used to prevent any voice from being heard, using short words and convictions properly regarding George Washington's extortion, for example, let alone regarding that and how he agreed to help James Madison and the founders behind him and his plan. And George Washington agreed to use that plan. And that is what caused the American, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitutional Convention, and us being told to get the Constitution unabridged, and us being told we have rights that are too numerous to list, and us being communicated to understand that breaching method, where people would change, would state collusion, the courts would, and the difference of their collusion with all natures of crime scenes, all natures and notions of crime and punishment, whilst tactically delusions wrought relative to how this is replaced at campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly. So, in other words, this method comes with, if we're all on the same page, we simultaneously can give easements to the fact, treatment, nature, and names uses of all leaders, where and how this breaching method maintains other things, others, or selves, blamed right for things it knew would be increasingly demonstrated by nature relative to everything else, and in demonstration simultaneously of itself. For example, through appreciation, honestly, and properly with the scientific value of a human fact treatment nature breaching method. Simultaneously, hyper additionally, we have to appreciate it as a predicate acts with facts delivery system method relative to how also, even though we have means outside of courts and police stations to have themselves hierarchies above themselves and everything below everything. In other words, each age and nature of campus is used for a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, and or the difference of that and how it is also simultaneously a criminal insidiousness delivery system method, and or in other words, and or in other words, also motivations screening because it role method because this has people want to get into. No one wants to have their syntax and used for systems tactical ulterior from the one that has everything manifest the way it is, its way. See, we're supposed to have experts to allow people to appreciate what is true always, not denying the slightest sequence, not valuing having it denied. This preaching method showed each age and nature, fact treatment nature, where and how. It has to use confessions, including as statements and or including as asking questions to cover up and pretend not to realize sequence shifts roles, styles of nature and natures of logic that can't afford to have discerned, how nature is using and has used exceptions in exception nature. There are means to discern equally. It's manifest unequally. Looks like, in other words, because everyone's hurt sickly distinctly by this preaching method, a method to keep how sickly non-distinctly used functionally, because nature's demonstrating it, and the breaching method knew, and it is more probable and plausible that it knows. In other words, we could charge this as countries A through Z at the same time, a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, while simultaneously tapping into those things we agree about that that no company or individual groups of individuals are going to be able to afford. And we better than free, we could fix the tactically denatured. This breaching method set millions of people up needing food and resources from other locations simultaneously, hyper additionally from where and how. That's going to cause hyper additionally. That was only allowed by the breaching method, but it's going to cause hyper additional apparent motivations, nature's needs and interests associated for relative to those questions to replaced. We have questions: what caused slavery? Again, the human predicate acts of facts delivery system method. And I am not a lawyer. I am not a doctor. I'm not a police forum. There are recorded collusions with people like Ron Adams, who's been typing. In other words, I don't know who Ron Adams is. And I never met a Joshua Julian, but he was his recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with digital crimes, inter-services, with the same house /S involved with wire crimes of police refusing to identify themselves. And these are police forms, intercities, and on off the spots next to the Connecticut news locations. And off their homes, whereas everyone's next to each other. See, this breaching method ducks off where it used and uses the differences of people A through Z and maintains self-valued roles. Otherwise, that body is sensed, including if that body is a majority of people, including if that body is everyone. Black pupils. See the whites of eyes. See what is practical to. See, when we want to have a debate about if we were going to have a debate as Americans about if it was practical or not to theorize that this could be cipher, not just the reasons that we were told that there was a phrase, a sentence famous in American history, don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. Partially this because they want us to know. In other words, they had nothing. And there was a breaching method that was involved with the torture, extortion, and slavery. Fact, treatment, nature, slavery, therefore physical, of every single person. Again, we must appreciate the extortion of George Washington, honestly, but this is offensively forbid. Self-valued our use of the difference between states' rights, used criminally foreign influence definitions and treatments of it and uses of it, or the federal. And the difference of that, because these are families mixed. In other words, this breaching method, this is a certain type, every nature of difference was employed by this breaching method that was hyper sophistication. In other words, and we could trace this because where and how we could trace other things, others ourselves, being and having been blamed for things our founders communicated to blame on the true breaching method. They communicated for us to understand where the laws were against what everyone could say, while it was forcing them to say, to pretend practical, that anyone spoke for practical reason, to use Immanuel Kant's phrase, or pure reason, to use Immanuel Kant's phrase. In other words, practical reason is a phrase that we all know for the dictionary definition of it. There was no formal voices with that. Even when they were countering it to it, they were entertaining the subjects tactically separated, simultaneously tactically grouped, and entertained that way. Tactical ulterior from how nature communicates, with the difference between how we are a species volume simultaneously. We are an individual of the individual species volume, with other species volumes being demonstrated to us. A shared quality and nature of consciousness. Even the bugs have it. An awareness, just a knowing. Vaccines. In the suburbs, there are hardly any. There's been about a century. People have been mowing, maybe less, But now it's really starting. Decades, it's starting to add up, and there are hardly any worms at all. The whole nature of the soil, and see that worms nature shows that when it rains, the bugs are not in the air. They're not landing on the water. But guess what? The worms walk into the puddles, and there's for additional and a different kind of food for the birds. Then they're walking into the bodies of water, which no longer have fish. Everything's polluted. Even the sea has high levels of lead, because we have been systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hypernative pure. And so the difference between the founders, there's three nature of founders. There's the nature of our founders who had to counter extort and force to be the other founders. And they didn't have the free speech either, because everything and everyone is sensed through forced roles with groups and or as individuals relative all natures of investigation and perspective were not just are used remotely criminally foreign influence tactical delusions wrought and that self-value. This can be discerned with descriptions of witch trials, what caused it, how with definitions of subjects that leave out what was simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. Science shows there's an additional identity of hyper simultaneous. Also not the one that is the identity of everything at once. While it is not, but anyway. That's one of the ways we could discern it. The vaccines. boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. So this is not like a joke. It's positive. In other words, it sounds like one because real evolution science / sciences should and does only feel like game / s or else we sense. It can't be defended on identity of practical reason description, for example, that wants to pretend they could debate and have honest logic and reason and sane even if they want to debate that the suburbs are tactically denatured. There's a difference between having countries with millions of people that are hungry, but the ground's all tactically denatured everywhere, and or that places reliant upon other places. Other places are reliant upon that. There are proofs that even this breaching method took away species that were like plant and food species that were, native to areas. They tactically denatured everything, changed nature's identity of relationship to the grounds and nature of relationship to itself. Its identity of relationship to itself. Its identity to the extent we could discern perfectly. To an extent, we know the value of the seasons perfectly, even though they didn't get here. To an extent, we know it now, what is actually active, and the value of things grouped. And to an extent, we know history. See, but when we start relying upon experts and things like the nature debate contains that which has been from off-all locations, hyper additional collusions at those locations, and with names uses and databases uses. The republic for which we stand came from ancient times. So Ron Adams has been involved with digital crimes with a proven principled child offender and more recorded with involvements that retired police chiefs had with it. Also with their family and intimate ties with the same house / S. And a whole bunch of people tied to them have been planting evidence on my street from other areas, including these are a whole bunch of people that work at Harvard Hospital, tied to Ray Coloro and people with the name Lombardo, names Lombardo and Leahy, have been fabricating falsified. They have roles of all kinds of the forging doctors' names, fake transcripts of people, roles with judges and prosecutors, various courts, used remotely criminally foreign influence, time collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and intercampuses, identity thefts, frauds, and slanders on the roles on the campuses and off of it. And the difference of that, time rolls with news, planting evidences at locations and next to them. See, forgiveness is because these things wouldn't be if everyone would follow mandated law with care and with that nature of love that is self as self, or nature of debate about it. See, the nature of debate contains reliance upon also simultaneously criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents offensively pretended legitimately read. This is at countries A through Z, because this is only allowed to be because of the off locations role / S. So our countries, like, they have to hide what our founders really communicated in Russia and in America about what it really is the value of the suburbs and or of means to it. This breaching method only allowed criminal insidiousness natures of means to make positives out of negatives as collusions too / hyper collusion singular. This breaching method came hyper additional from names A through Z from before modern religious messengers were born. This is a method that maintained that measures and maintains defenses of identities of logic, of reason that can't defend themselves and or their nature, and not self-value that and the difference of it. Because in other words, there are psychopath takes on the legitimacy of aggression used at all formal and other natures of, all the different types of communications locations per use of location slash s as one of the things that unites all the people where and how it can be recorded. Each individual has other individuals, has grouped people with group differences used and voicings of humanity that are and have been theater. So in other words, little kids from New York City, from Hartford, let alone New York City, they could discern there's a nature of theater. They haven't been told to call it criminal insidiousness, but now they're being counter-extorted because we are extorted at countries A through Z. In other words, there are suits and ties, and there are counters, there are exceptions that have self-valued roles, using their expertise, their knowledge of good and evil. For example, to use a phrase from the Old Testament, out of sequence too, because of the identities of reason and the defenses of their like people with the defenses of passion and regarding what they think about the value of their defenses syntactically or identity wise of the Bible and of its forms, and regardless of the form of it, but not leaving out, for example, at the beginning of the Old Testament, it says, it dictates how to defend the Old Testament. It says only defend this part right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together, and the part before it, where it's parsing its identity relationship to itself and the value of that, as you are, therefore. But now through systems tactical ulterior from its own. Nature itself is showing us it's hypernative. The Constitution on a bridge is hypernative. What can't make words for that? Appreciate that. Can't make words properly for a president / chief. That's because if you entertain and love as known names A through Z of the sciences every year of your life, in other words, it's not to say it's their blame them. Don't leave out the breaching method. We can observe other things, others ourselves, not only blame consciously for things that nature itself and our founders communicated to blame on the breaching method. In other words, not just because things are published that pretend other. Oh, it was a T-tax, everyone got sick? No. Sick and tired of the T-tax, so they made a declaration. No. Slavery was entrenched north and south. Regardless of who made which trials up, or what it was made up, or what extent it was made up, in other words, it was about this. Is about that torture, extortion, slavery method, sickly, distinctly against our founders and against everyone else. Sickly, distinctly from against our founders, from how that was against the president. This is also why it's important to understand the three natures of our founders. One of them is the Native Americans. Even though they were fighting with each other, their value is that nature, hyper-native, prevented short words with convictions proper, let alone the protraction, as the value of chief. But it is also hyper-additionally president / chief, because as the species body, we are in the same ancient trap. And so chiefs were formed like a human species body, immune system. But to be cured, we have to get back to being hypernated pure. The republic was formed before it became criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions wrought. This is more probable and practical to convict. Vaccines, I do those things. In other words, we could look at it as the species body in trouble. In other words, we could change the nature of all the natures of businesses and things involved. There are proofs, for example, regarding, I don't know what the Philadelphia corridor is. Before I look it up, I wanted to speak about the Philadelphia corridor mentioned in videos with a Judge Napolitano's YouTube channel called Judging Freedom. He just mentioned it again today with a different person there. I mentioned it with another guest too. The Philadelphia corridor is a part with the conjunction between the species body, people named Israel, and people named Palestine, people named America, people named Russia, people named Ukraine, people named China. See, our names have been used remotely while others pretended. This breaching method measured and maintains only capable of being pretended. And it knew that any grouping of humanity, entertaining locations, areas, and states, factory, nature, thoughts, quality, styles, aspects, nature, as is, can't depend that and afford defenses properly or afford to even be. Short words, let alone to protract, short words with convictions proper regarding what we all think and believe. There's a difference between polling people and then making what they say. I mean, what it does, leaving out exceptions, exception nature. Pretending roles with even uses of the value of voting where it didn't mean anything. In other words, they're leaving out the value of the Constitution unabridged and why and how we have rights that are too numerous to list. See, that was his play, where it put the difference between the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, the executive branch's names, the judicial branch's names, the political branch's names. It used measures and maintains U/S of those differences. Cover-ups and collusions with U/S of it since before our founders were born. Per what designed the suburbs tactically denatured. The other sciences, they get away with pretending, in other words, and we have formal delusions to address. And how the people countering leak while they're pretending they're just doing their jobs. In other words, on off the Connecticut State Corrections offices in Wethersfield, Hartford line. A whole bunch of people on off Central Connecticut State University are recorded through decades since before, since its inception. Central Connecticut State University was in New Britain, Connecticut, was his collusion with names intercities, where and how also the differences between black, white, the differences between things and people called white or people called black. See, we have culture that is separated from the hyperculture awareness. And the breaching method measures and maintains roles with that. Self-valued uses of difference. How could anyone pretend black or white is unified? What in other words, what unifies is species might, species body of individual bodies. What has the species volume science assigned answers with white and black. We have black people's whites of eyes, the same color eyes, while we have exceptions. But being used by itself, it is showing us the difference between sight and discernment and hyper discernment. But we have to appreciate this. We have to appreciate pantheism / hyperpantheism being a function critical to the republic for which we stand. And its system uses how other countries are not that for a reason. That difference is also valued within as its own, so we could discern its own, because that's with its own is that hypernative system, the one that uses other species' bodies this way, and ours, distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, further hyper simultaneously. So they've made employments in the value of it. In other words, they want to leave that, pretend that's value. It's not. There's a certain nature of, in other words, this makes people rise up and tells them to blame other things, others, or selves, the way the breaching method knew it would, on things the breaching method caused. Because it kept measured and maintained who was collusion with our founders, measured, sensed. And it overcame and is overcoming, even though it's recorded, that which was actually recorded. That was actually their communications. We were communicated to, not leave out how that everyone had poor speech. That was entertained speech in nature. Otherwise, they would be sensed by the breaching method. I learned at Central Connecticut State University in a lecture that there were laws that if anyone was even found out to be speaking about building outside of like that style of homes that we have, suburban homes, since before they were called the suburbs, since it was colonization and slavery was sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly north and south colonies. And it stayed that way, the north and south states, right up to the end of the Civil War, because this breaching method was adapting. And better than perfectly, unceasingly since before our founders were born. It made cities unfold only the way they were uniformly across the globe, simultaneously, worse. Simultaneously, everyone reliant upon value nature systems, tactical terrorists from its own, from their own, and needed to pretend other. For the nature of all that involved with this, actually. So the big countries, if they would be, in other words, we can make an easement on the use /s of names of leaders, because that's one of the things locations, areas, and states are only capable of doing, while defending themselves, pretending they spoke for or could speak for or know someone who spoke for or could speak for. Practical reason. Again, to use Immanuel Kant's phrase, but the dictionary definition of this phrase. In other words, let alone pure reason, which I'm defining as the hypernative. Because there is the hyper simultaneous, which is all things at once, so it is hypernative. Again, but we have been systems, in other words, we have left out how uses of the differences by that breaching method, how it's sickly to hurt people based on the pigment of their skin, etc., their sex, etc. All now through systems tactical terror from its own too. See, this made unnatural impositions upon names A through Z, on differences A through Z, including the branches of government. Only natural as criminal insidious nature are the impositions you have. And everybody wants to help you. Every body of the species body. We have to contain uses of our names and simultaneously, while using these negatives, manifest in Ukraine and manifest in Palestine, in Israel, and with borders. You see, these big countries still have problems with borders relative to the value of cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall /S. Excuse me one moment. So we can make a virtually owned counter to the needs for war. You know, just like weapon system, and we can as a gaming system. And in other words, we could open negotiations with the countries that these big countries are reliant upon for, vitamin C, foods, and for means and needs to adapt to, even because and to overcome, let alone to overcome speculation with entertained things like wars, things like people pretend that practical reason was spoken for, people pretending that patriotism was spoken for. I'm not saying patriotism wasn't existent or isn't existent and doesn't act, but I'm saying where and how it counts, where and how we are fact-cheaping nature that can change everything, make means come out of nowhere for all sides at once, otherwise we sense. That's what nature enables us to access. So in Russia and in America, for example, they study each other. Meanwhile, they have roles with psychiatry together. They have roles together on the state of Connecticut corrections offices, through their roles with predicate acts at campuses together, with a whole bunch of different countries too, though, because they are styles of logic and natures influenced by predicate acts with facts, roles, needs, and natures, uses of locations, left manifest that way. For this method that knew that any leader that would try to become a leader, even no matter how powerful, even if it was a king, a pharaoh, locations, areas, and states are still entertained value nature systems tactical ulterior from the one that answers all our questions. Not even best, but only imperfectly, increasingly positive, also positive unto itself way. All exception nature shows the same thing. Or a special difference. Our Earth's concentrated value, our own, is forced from here. Leaf of Hades, which is distinct from death. The leaf of Hades is more probably and more practically, per ancient pantheism, having been used to describe what can be observed as force-based nature of transfer of being. It's relative to the study of the extent of its identity we can observe with each subject that comes with its perfect identity of relationship to itself, only increasingly value in the value of that equally. This is where English was revealed to teach as a grouping language. This is more probable and practical. to theorize, let alone to convict. Regarding the history of language, other languages too, the same thing. The sciences have been entertained. Criminal and insidious natures of uses of their names. A certain type of victim / hyper victim that is only allowed to use names this way. Many pray. So we have means to discern this. And we have means, in other words, there are proofs that the Philadelphia corridor, even if not directly, has to do with even if they have peaceful nuclear energy generation, you have to constantly keep water cooled. Otherwise, the whole world has problems more and more. But this also creates natures of intelligence and interference directed to hide lies that, in other words, gives them more truths to use for lies too. But in other words, no one has a free speech. And then, in other words, where we should say, well, this is a logistical threat. They can't say that because then people are going to target that. And all those sides are used remotely. So we can make this positive, and we can put another means to make logistical security not only felt, but fathomable on sides A through Z. It will change. We have to change the nature of it by adding hyper additionally roles with this as the species body, trying to help the species body. Another nature of industry. Temporary industry / and means out of nowhere. So we have these countries, we would do this for you guys. And you guys help them. And in other words, we could do it. We could build people in other countries that have nothing, a paradise, and have them agree to help countries, the big countries that instead of having nuclear weapons, it needs to have our energy, our nature at war as the human species body's eating itself. We can go back to the hypernative system. And this is why there is a difference between president and chief. And this is why there is a difference between the president as George Washington and or James Madison and the rest of the presidents. So people would ask questions, like say there was the news and things today, people would say, there were James, the Monroe Doctrine. And James Monroe was the equivalent of a Native American chief, where the Native Americans, against Native Americans, by nature itself was forcing them to argue and fight because the breaching method itself was forcing it. And nature was forcing demonstrations of that. But with those demonstrations, the breaching method had employed, people, things, needs, and natures relying upon those demonstrations blamed past and actively on other things, others ourselves, while showing needs to come to do that. People that hurt everyone, if even someone tied to you was found out about speaking outside of the internationally monitored context, the foundation of the suits and ties counters and exceptions as an array used remotely. Clearer than day, black pupils. We can discern this. Clearer than day, black pupils. Where we are polled. Quinnipiac University has roles with a whole bunch of people tied to prosecutors and judges and foreign and domestic military and medical who have been planting evidences, wire crime acts and methods with people named O'Brien and Cologne. And who are increasingly involved. This is a Rick Sanfaglione who taught me how to confess this, in a Fred Grouzet, and they do it years apart. A Fred sought me out as a stranger to make confessions. That, in other words, they're trying to attach me to fake locations with the people I have in the wire crimes and police forms and courts switching and forging names, speaking fake things in records, as the people that were also next to the court, next to the World Trade Center that day, and spots next to it with their extended family members, and rolls with that. As people who have been stacking predicate acts with facts and databases at campuses with the difference between themselves, other kids or adults, and the schools' names. Because it's also from off it, they're attaching everyone to fake to change communication. In other words, they keep everyone's mouth shut. That's why and how they're leaking too. They're refusing to identify themselves. One officer forced himself into my house and made a confession. Then to cover it up, he handed me a card. In other words, I had no communication with him. They probably put fake communication with me with that too. He threatened me not to do anything to a Scalora. I don't even know what Scalora he's talking about, but he knows that I recorded and had confirmed because I had it confirmed on Facebook. For example, a Robert Rodriguez had confessed to Scalora, a Subby Scalora, and others did. He's one of the ones involved with also others with abuses of little kids in a Phil Colola with Whiting Forensics and people from Hartford Hospital involved personally and professionally with judges and prosecutors in a whole bunch of different countries and overt criminal enterprises, and then pretending it's legitimate, like with their roles on Church Street in Old Weathersfield with the news and houses associated with the wire crimes on my street with the police refusing to identify themselves. Well, I caught them with a principal child abuser at the same time and roles with untimely deaths, even if they were made up. And the uses of them recorded too, also singularly used. But you have to get them on paper to discern this. They have remote uses of Judge Napolitano's Facebook page. Facebook people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Even when they have real motivations for roles with this, they have hyper additional ones that they left out. For example, they have roles collusions with the principal child abuser's campus and with the intelligence community as and how they are actually black and KKK themed, etc. They're involved with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes. So forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method, however, because A through Z, you guys and your differences were used remotely. So we're going to examine how the experts on the different names and stuff like that, tactically delusions raw. Sometimes it's them the fault. Sometimes it's the people. The difference of it is also used. The overt criminal enterprises, private ones, criminal and logics, and natures of people A through Z. As styles and or that body is sensed, including if it is a majority of people, including if it is everyone, black people. We must force the value of the Constitution unabridged, and the reason why we have to appreciate how we have rights that are too numerous to list relative to this and the refusal to identify themselves as these names. These are multiple police departments with the same house/S, and their roles with Afghanistan, Korea, Russia, Germany, Japan, Italy, Ukraine, Lebanon, all this at the same time. They all brought up too. The same people involved with this game when I was at each campus I went to, there are connections between it. And the people further involved with medical corruption. And the judges and prosecutors speaking to fake things, their family members involved. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, not legitimate, unmarked police forms, roles with acting professors, unmarked. In other words, we have identities of the law at countries A through Z, black pupils who speak law through an systems tactile terror from laws, the dictionary's definition of it unabridged, not influenced by collusions also with the prisons, Sandy Hook prisons. No, but some of this idea to the president is to turn these negatives with uses of our names. When not one modern countries leader is going to have proper uses of their name, because other locations, areas, and states, area where the species body is. The real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures bear reliant upon lines of fake practical reason descriptions, value descriptions that are, and the motivations for it. Hyper additionally from those they even realize themselves. This preaching method, I can show you how it tricked you guys, forced you guys to not be able to handle, discern that which was properly when you grow up, that which was actually recorded when you were little, and per a method that is manifest at countries A through Z. Nature shows us means to discern this, but we have to force mandated law follow. And thank you, people. Please, someone tell Judge Napolitano. No, in other words, this before the years before, more than a year before the war between and the fighting between, killing between Israel and Palestine, and Ukraine and Russia, I put a counter script because I saw all their names involved with this, how the remote uses are. You could discern it too. You have to force them on paper. They've been attaching me to fake conversations with people since I was a kid. I didn't realize it was connected until I put a sustained effort. Before the World Trade Center attack, Hartford Court's family members, people associated with Connecticut's District Court and New Britain Superior Court, they effected confessions and requests for help to me because they were forced to federal evidences, crime acts and roles, and predicate acts and roles that they don't realize know mixed with ones they do. Also on and off campuses next to them. I never saw Eric Burgess on campus in my life. There are proofs that they might have pretended that was recorded because they put fake audio and video transcripts. They have fake phone transcripts. WFSB pretended I had fake conversations. They had pretended I had conversations with the police when I was a kid. And the kids that did go down to the police station, they forced, tricked her, persuaded them to change the words. As collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and various natures of federal criminals that they brought up, and then attaching me increasingly to fake ties and natures of ties to people. I don't know it too. Sal Civiello and I forgot the other kid's name. I never had a class with the other kid. And neighbors of Sal Civiello, increasingly involved with FBI in foreign countries with body dumping spots and timed use / estimate, even if they're made up because they're one of their stories. They're increasingly leaking such. When they jump in, so on Facebook, way other thing was recorded. Even the difference of their roles making Facebook pages pretending to be me, pretending to be my family members. These are the same people with WFSB attached me to fake conversations with them and about the World Trade Center attack. And with the people that are involved with the wire crimes, to have their extended family members, and they have names on all sides of that case. In the in a case that was in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center that day, and the court itself, from inside the court, legal papers had been post-dated from inside the court. Those same names and their extended family members involved with the wire crimes on my street with the police and the different departments, Hartford Police, Newington Police, and Rocky Hill Police, with them at the same time, the Britain Police associated with them. And prosecutors and judges involved with criminally foreign influence uses of investigators, and criminally foreign influence, planting different narratives and saying things after they said opposite roles with Covington Street names, sequence shift roles with them. Criminally foreign influence uses of courts, roles, collusions there. As their roles recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with people on my street that used to live here. And people like named Ray Clough and Timothy O'Brien, Andrew O'Brien, and their families. are involved with intelligence next to Trinity College and next to Central Connecticut State University, and their ties to each other, where they have roles with also a Mark Violet and a Justa Kovinskis with some KKK themed, black themed military police forms, and roles with courts, judges, and family members, with wire crimes on my street, planting evidences on my street roles, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and delusions. And with Joshua Schumack is also involved with his mother, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Now I have a conversation with her, but it's confirmed on Facebook. She's involved with one of the ones involved with multiple child offenders, leaders of kids of various natures. Say have roles of various natures of organized crime, not just legitimately as their roles with the intelligence community. There are people named and tied to it, John DeMauro, and former mayors involved at the state education building and next to it, who have roles with organized crime, groups, criminal enterprises, and Saudis were involved with. Also, the uses of the differences of America's side, so because America forced Saudis to collusion at the same exact time, while the Saudi attackers forced collusion, for example, with the uses of torture syntax and with the uses of words like radical and like extremism and like reason or logic and use of every name. And it's also per uses of locations next to everything and everyone, like next to the Fox Connecticut News, next to WFSB. Those same names have roles planting predicate acts with facts in databases that are recorded, and we're going to discern this. So, in other words, all sides in criminal and civil cases. Sometimes it's the prison's collusion. Sometimes it's increasingly up the corrections offices of Connecticut and the judicial branch offices are people involved with predicate planting evidences on and off campuses and on my street, and they do it at other people's houses relative to roles with predicate acts with facts method roles. Use singular by a breaching method by people. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police one. Ron Adams is one of the ones involved with the Joshua Julian, recorded involved with judges, prosecutors, and their family members, involved personally and professionally with foreign and domestic medical families and military families, with drugs and medicines crimes with kids, federal evidences crimes with kids, wire crimes with kids, mail crimes, same names involved with elderly homes and on off the state, on off on veterans' homes. See the construction of the veteran homes, a shadow of the New York City, unacceptable. We have means way beyond this. See, hear the word paradise. Vaccines. I teach those things, but long, who disbelieve? Get them on the paper.